everyone, welcome to the Art of Teaching Art. Today I'm going to show you how to add watercolour to a monoprint but using watercolour pencils instead of actual watercolours. These are two monoprints that I completed. What I have done is then photocopied these onto cartridge paper, and the reason I've done this is firstly to fade back the image to give me something to work on top of, but also because if I worked on top of the actual monoprinting ink it would blend and smudge together, and that's not the effect that I'm going for in this particular instance. So I'm going to choose one of these images to work on. I think I'm going to go with the skull and flower image, and I'm using these Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolour pencils, but any watercolour pencils will do. So I'm thinking about using more natural colours, so the greys and browns onto the skull, and then maybe a brighter pop of colour for the flower. So I'm going to work on the skull first and then work onto the flower. So with these you can use them like normal colouring pencils to build up the layers and blend, and then you put water over the top. I'm going to be quite selective, I still want quite a bit of the white of the paper to show through. I'm going to start with some of the darker areas, but I'm going to be quite careful. I don't want this going super dark. So you can use these just like normal colouring pencils. So you're trying to get a nice smooth blend on the page. You don't want to have too much there, but also you want just enough, especially for the watercolour pencils. Do you want that paint to be able to work? Also, you don't want to add too much darkness. I feel it's quite easy to put a little bit too much when you're doing this technique a little bit more. So just a little bit of darkness, and then I'm going to work in just like I would with colouring pencils over the top, blending to just emphasise this detail of the skull. And I'm also going to avoid using the white in this instance as well. I'm going to let the white of the paper show through. So it added a little bit on there, and then we've got the other eye. I'm just going to use some of the paler colours there. And then I'm going to start in with the browns to just give that natural edge to it. Just change the colour slightly. So this can be a really good way of exploring colour. It can also be an easy way to experiment with an image that you're working on, see if you want to kind of develop it further. So I'm just layering up the pencils a little bit, so I get that mix of colour when eventually I add the water on top. You could, of course, work in colour and pencil over a photocopy as well. Just gives you a bit more scope of things that you can develop. So you can use the pencils quite softly to get less colour on. You can use them a little bit harder, so you're just pressing a little bit harder, adding a bit more detail. You can shade areas, add lines of colour, a whole mixture of kind of things to work with these. Just going to bring some of this down in the top corner here. So now I'm using the pencil on its side to cover a larger area. So there's a few different things using the tip of the pencil and the side of the pencil to just add that little bit of detail kind of in. This is the detail that was on the print, so I'm just kind of going over that to just emphasize that detail. So I think I'm happy with that in terms of adding for the skull area, and I'm going to put water on that before I do the other bit, because otherwise when you put the two colours next to each other you'll blend them together. So I'm just using a fairly fine brush, nice for watercolour, and I'm going to be using the side of the brush first of all so I can be a little freer with it. So just enough water on my brush and just working carefully to the edges. I don't want to go over the edges of the next piece. So what's really nice about this is you've still got the texture of the monoprint showing through, but this is coming over with the colour. Can make a really big difference, and I'm just going to blend it out. So when I'm blending something out I'm using just a dip of water to blend in. So we start off on the kind of darker part with water, and using that, and then I wash off my brush, squeeze off any excess water, and then blend just the colour that I've added. It gives it a really nice light touch. You can also use this to show more explicit sketch marks. So if you press a little bit harder, shaded less with the watercolour pencils, that's going to allow you to explore kind of mark making behind the work as well. So I actually really love that effect. It's looking really nice and delicate. You've got the blends of the water, which is just the lovely thing about watercolours, leaving those lovely edges. And I feel like I've still got the dark and lights in this. So I'm going to move on to work on the flower, and I'm going to have to be really careful with this and quite selective, I think. I'm going to go with some pinks and reds because there's a nice selection in this. But I'm going to just take my time a little bit to add it. So starting with the pink, and I'm just going to add it in the kind of shadowed area, so between the petals more so. So any kind of shadowed areas, I'm just going in with the darkest of the pinks first of all. And then I will work over this area here. I'm going to actually just go over most of the area just with the side of this pink pencil, and then I can add some of the details in with this pencil as well. So I'm building up that texture. So I've got the marks already from the monoprint, and then I'm building up the texture just selectively with the pencils, and those marks will likely kind of stay there if I'm quite careful when I'm putting the water on. Part of this is being careful and mindful, part of this is from experimentation, so it's all about developing your ideas, trying things out to work out what works the best. Happy with that. I'm going to now add the water. So again, I've been really careful to be quite detailed with this. So using some water on my brush to just blend these areas now. Using the side of my brush to blend it onto the petals. So I don't want to blend it onto the petals too much, but I do want that just soft focus there. So again, just taking your time to be quite careful, bringing the areas outwards, work with the image. You can use a circular motion to blend with your brush. I'm going to work over the top with just little circle motions with my brush. So I'm activating the colour but still keeping that texture there. I'm happy with that. I think I've layered the colours nicely. You've got the dark areas, you've got the light areas, but it's also a development from the original print, which I think is quite great to see. It's got a kind of softness to it compared to this one, which is slightly harsher, so I've explored a kind of different look there, and I'd be really interested to explore this idea further. Thank you so much for watching and have a really great day.